through objects. And then lastly, learn about Pelaez's mixed media series based on her interpretation of the laws of attraction. So I'm pretty excited to get started. And if you're ready, Erika, we'll start with you.
Sure. All right, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, can you see that all right? Fantastic. All right, so hi everybody. Thank you so much to Diane and everyone at Women in Their Work for this opportunity. I'm really excited to share with y'all what I've been working on in the studio lately. Before I get into the details about my painting and process, I should introduce myself. My name is Erika Alonso, and I'm an artist living and working in Houston. I'm actually at my studio right now over at Winter Street. If I had to categorize my work, I would say it's something along the lines of abstract expressionism or visionary abstract. And in describing it, I would say it's a glimpse into my inner world full of creatures and beings, feelings of shapes and lines and color. So today I would like to share, let me see, there we go, share with you some of my recent paintings and the process and thinking behind them. I should start by mentioning that my paintings really start with no intention, no goal, or really like, I have no idea where I'm going with them. I just kind of go in there and hope for the best. The prep work varies depending on whether I'm using acrylic or oil, but I've mostly been working in acrylic lately, so I will stick with describing that process and use one recent painting as an example. So here's the sort of first step. I typically prime the surface, canvas in this case, with a few layers of gesso, followed by a few layers of absorbent ground. And after that dries, I'll add some strong, like gestural marks to the canvas, either in charcoal or graphite, sometimes both. I think in this case, I used water-soluble graphite, a little bit of charcoal, and it also looks like I got my hands on some spray paint because there's some spray paint in there as well. So going back to the gestural marks, I think it sort of serves two purposes. In my mind, I imagine it as sort of like energizing the canvas. And secondly, more practically, it eliminates that blank canvas anxiety that I struggle with. I think a lot of artists do as well. So let me see if I have another. There's the second progress shot. Once the canvas is energized, I get to work on the underlayers, which are really thin washes of acrylic paint. You can actually see them peeking through in the end result on some of the paintings. So these thin acrylic washes, you know, sometimes they reinforce the marks, other times they overlay them or even erase them. This is like where the absorbent ground is important, as it helps the paint behave more like watercolor with the drips and being able to lift the color and whatnot. Okay, here's another progress shot. So through a series of additional layers of charcoal and paint and adding and subtracting, I observe forms starting to emerge. And from there, I paint very quickly and all at once. I tend to use all of the colors at one time. Painting without intention is very difficult because you don't know where to start or where to end. And it can be stressful if you think too much about it. So my go-to trick is to actually find a place in the painting, what I call moments, but essentially it's just like a place where the colors interact in a certain way, or the charcoal lends itself into a figure that I find interesting, and that's where I will start up. And I think I have one more. All right, we're almost done. And so I really just paint around and around until it's done. And you know, really defining this part of the process is difficult for me because I become very involved in what I would call painting instinctively. I am making a series of decisions, but I'm doing so intuitively. And over time, I've come to learn that it's super important for me to listen to that intuition. Otherwise, the painting does not turn out very good. So let's see, here's the final painting for now. I don't name my paintings, but this one has a nickname, which I will share with you. It's called It's an Adventure. And so I want to point out that for me, the painting comes first and then the meaning. In other words, I didn't understand why this painting revealed itself as it did until it was already painted. You know, with these paintings, I think the meaning is made of paint, and that meaning is always in flux. Paintings are technically static objects, and I think in this way that they struggle to elicit strong emotion, at least when compared to temporal arts like dance or film or music. With those, you're forced to spend a certain amount of time like watching the movie or listening to the song, and it really buys the artist some time to engage you and immerse you. But as a painter, you have to elicit strong emotion on demand. The painting has to catch one's eye and keep one's attention long enough in order for them to really engage with it and be immersed in it. So the first thing that I try to do with my paintings is make them engaging through their ambiguity. A lot of the meaning is really left up to the viewer. Like I said, I don't like to name my paintings, and when I actually do, they're always changing. And I think part of that is because the paintings are changing for me as well. You know, but also I deliberately leave them unnamed because I really want the viewer to decide for themselves what they see. Secondly, and more recently, I've been making paintings that are very intricate and almost landscape-like, you know, thinking paintings as a destination. This started happening post-COVID, and I think that it is the result of changes in my process. You know, I've always used painting as an escape from reality, but especially more so over the past year. And you know, I can, when I'm working on these paintings, I can really just spend hours getting lost in the colors and just like being in a whole different world, and trying to find places to hide Easter eggs for someone to find and get excited about. And I really hope that the viewer can have that same experience, and that these paintings are something to look at, something to get lost in, and maybe somewhere to go. Like you can escape into this fantasy world for a bit and forget about everything that's terrible in the world. So I think that the ambiguity, the not quite abstract, not quite figurative, the subjects with shared edges competing for your eye's attention, and the spontaneity of my process, I think all of these things really come through in the end result. Nothing's really there after all other than charcoal and paint. But as a viewer, you can take that material and mold it into things, creatures, beings, flowers, landscapes. And while it's definitely not any one of these things, it's very possible that it's all of these things. And because it's all of these things, the viewer can decide for themselves and engage with the work on their own terms. So I'd like to think that these paintings that I'm making are static in a temporal space, but ever-changing and dynamic in the imaginative space. And that's it. Thank you so much. And I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Erika. We do have some questions. We'll hold them till the end of our third presentation, but next up is Adriane McCray.
Hi, everyone. I'm Adriane. I am Austin-based, but I'm between Austin and Los Angeles, currently in LA, which is why I get a little bit of sun here, and spent a lot of time kind of doing any shooting I could in Texas, where I do most of my film work. So I'm primarily a filmmaker. I'm currently writing on a television series called Perry Mason, and I just finished a small kind of group project via the Studio Museum in Harlem and MoMA's, it's called Memories of the Futures project. It was a, collective memory project. And I think during quarantine, as we all needed time to just sit back and kind of reckon with the self, a lot of my practice was geared towards the fine arts of filmmaking. And I think breaking down the walls of cinema, you're wondering, okay, how can, picture and sound add to the layers of storytelling. And so for me, I ventured on a project, it's called Raw Tourmaline. So I'll share my screen here. All right, can you guys see that? Awesome. So this is kind of an in-process project that is an installation. computer's freezing here. That's ultimately going to be an installation where sound and picture is mixed so that you are kind of walking through what my process was in excavating memories. So I'm going to walk you through all of that. The project itself ended up being titled Raw Tourmaline, but it essentially kind of takes me through the memories of, I used a handful of subjects and then objects that they've had collected around since their childhood, and then navigating their stories and memory through it. So I sent them a prompt, and I think going in, I guess my work is always heavily research-based, but I was really interested in Richard McGuire's this here graphic novel, and you essentially are in the same space, but throughout time, it kind of changes based on the objects around it. And so for me, I wanted to create something like that, but with this space that never existed for myself and these subjects. How can I move around through these places and their objects? So I sent them, I kind of like both had to guide them through their relationship with themselves or their childhood self, as well as introduce myself to that relationship. So my starting point was not at all a direct kind of filming or anything like that. It was an archival pull was what we'll call it. So I sent them these questionnaires. And so they had the time to sit with themselves, think about, okay, what is this thing that you're sharing with me? What condition is it in? All the physical properties of it. And then we started to get into the short answers. So at the bottom of the screen here, you'll see what is your strongest memory associated with these objects? How did these things make you feel? You know, where did it live? All of these things that they can kind of get an idea of, okay, what is the meaning, significance of this thing you have here? And then starting to poke around it, what in my brain lives here? What do I associate with it? So they collected about 8 objects each. I didn't use all of them, but from them, I would review their answers. So I start my archival work. Oops, there we go. Here, so I logged everything that they'd said and written in. Some were handwritten, some were not, which is an interesting thing for later, but they kind of gave me an idea of both, again, the physical properties of what to expect. Again, I haven't seen any of these things, as well as their memories with them. So those are down here at the end. Some of them had like lots of things to say, some of them didn't at all, which led them to my next phase. So I scheduled phone interviews with each of my subjects, and that is when I started to do my sound archival work. So with each interview, I kind of started talking through again the same question. So it's like, okay, I thought about this the other day, I have this in my head. But then beyond that, right, I asked other questions. So stemming off of, okay, what is your strongest memory associated with it? I would ask about the memory. So right there is my first interjection into, okay, here's this person, this place with themselves as a child, and then here I am. And so I'm going to walk you through, or kind of play a little clip here of an interview, and this is via phone, so I'm not, again, in person yet.
Is willing to say what needs to be said in order for her to feel like she is standing up for what she believes in or is protecting herself in a most constructive way.
Yeah.
So I think to learn to do too.
I get that. I like that. Okay, I'm gonna move on to the next object. But also, if you could, I know your mom is the keeper of the archives, but if she does have a picture of you or your grandmother with a cross, that would be helpful. Okay, so now we're on Granny Straw Hat. Same grandmother, correct?
Yes.
And this is the hat she gave you when you were little.
Yes.
Talk to me about like your summers or the activities that you had before you were old enough to go out with your friends in the neighborhood, like the kind of things you would do with your mom or your mom and dad or your grandmother, just to kind of, occupy your days, occupy your summers and things like that. You mentioned a specific picture or not picture. You mentioned a specific, no, you did. That you'd sit on the floor drinking juice, eating a snack in that hat. And this is kind of, part of your daily life. What kind of memories do you have of like little things that you would do with them?
Okay, so I'm stopping there, but essentially what their answers were my same thing, archival but in sound form. So what I had to do both sound-wise and picture was then to have the shoot itself, which kind of speaks for itself. I met with them a day, all kind of back to back, but they brought their objects and then kind of throughout the shoot were telling me about them. And then in that space, I also recorded it. So via sound, it was the revisiting a memory, but now I'm in this space physically. And so I wanted to do the shoot there because then you're wanting to capture, well, what is their physique and how are they kind of depicting their emotions in that way? Sorry, memories of their, how are they via emotions depicting their memories? So I'm gonna scroll through a couple of these quickly. This is Elizabeth in her dance bag. She brought a dance bag and ballet shoes, a Girl Scout pin. And so I wanted again to break down the objects, their relationships to it, but also the moments that they remembered. So I think the difference between motion picture and still image is that you get something that reaches beyond the screen and you pull in just that fraction of it. So you're understanding that this contains something wildly larger. And I was interested, I think, in the mixed media element of that, just because I was building a soundscape, which I'm in the process of basically taking those waves that I just showed you to something I use called Ableton. And then together, again, I think that would create the installation where one walks through physically, sees these things in different spaces and places as sound is being crossed. But that's raw tourmaline in progress.
Thank you so much for sharing. And so our third presentation is by Julie. Are you ready?
I am ready. Thank you for having me. Hi, everybody. So I am an abstract artist working primarily in alcohol inks. And this is actually my second career. My first career was as an art director in advertising. So when I come to my art, I have an approach with that strong sense of concept and messaging that I like to infuse into my work. I tend to work in series where each collection has its own overarching theme and message and execution style. So for this particular collection, this is the what I'm calling the Like Attracts Like series. And it's based on the law of attraction, which states that the energy, whether positive or negative, that you put your thoughts to and that whatever you focus on, that energy is attracted back to you. So if there's anything this pandemic has taught us, or a snowstorm that came out of nowhere, is that we are not in control of so much. So one thing we are in control of is our thoughts and what we put our attention to. And so I love the empowering message of just by thinking positively and visualizing what you want, whether it be small or for your future, that you can attract those very things into your life. And I had actually been experiencing examples of this. And so I was really ruminating on the whole idea of the law of attraction. So I approach these almost, I love the challenge of taking something intangible and abstract and creating a visual for it. So in this instance, I really looked at these almost on the molecular level. Each piece has larger shapes in the center, and those represent the originating thought or idea. And then the peripheral shapes are bending and turning to feed back into those center shapes and support them. In terms of construction, these were a labor of love. They have 7 different layers of, starting with, we have the base, and then ink wash on the bottom, and then iridescent acrylic on top of that, and then resin, and then the larger shapes, and then resin, and then the smaller shapes, and then more resin. And for me, I had been working in resin, but I had never done layering with resin. And so this this collection was kind of like a way to challenge myself to do that. And what it does is create these really subtle shadows so that the shapes almost look like they're floating. It's hard to see here on the screen, but the colors that they're all coming from the alcohol inks, and just kind of how Erika talked about intuitive. My pieces are like half intuitive and half very thought out. When working with the inks, if you're not familiar with alcohol inks, they are very concentrated pigment that you're literally pouring and diluting with rubbing alcohol. And then I use a heat emboss tool that blows hot air. So it's actually the air that is pushing the ink around. So you don't have full control. And I love that about this medium. It's very, very meditative, very soothing. So that initial part of it is very intuitive. And I actually use the movement of the ink to help guide me in how I cut these shapes. And then my first stage would be I have two here that aren't finished, but so these guys, I would plan out the layout before I would take it to the board. And each piece focuses on a different characteristic or energy that I wanted to attract more into my life. So we have curiosity attracts curiosity, courage attracts courage, exuberance attracts exuberance, authenticity attracts authenticity. And then these two new guys I have, honesty attracts honesty, and kindness attracts kindness. So I do have a video to share with you. If you follow me on Instagram at all, you see I really document a lot of my time in the studio. So I took those videos, which was about 2 months worth of work, and smashed them into a minute and a half. So I'm going to share that with you guys here now. All right, here we go. Okay, so that was that. And I just wanted to mention one more thing for anyone who is interested in learning alcohol inks, which I highly recommend. It's a great creative outlet. And I do offer an e-course on my website for that, for anyone interested. But that's it.
Great, thank you. We have one question that says, where is your studio located?
In my house here in Austin. Yeah.
I think this question is for Erika. It says, do you feel that your style of painting has changed due to COVID-19? If so, how?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not sure if my process and style has changed because of COVID or if it was, I think it's a little bit of both. It was already on its way somewhere else. I think it always is. But I think that COVID gave me more time. And honestly, I got to a point where I didn't, you know, like I really didn't want to spend my time like watching television, watching news, or, you know, even being on social media. So I think I just got more time. And how I spent that time was just like taking a painting and going further with it and making it more detailed.
Another question for you. Can you describe your feelings and or what you were thinking when you were painting instinctively?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I couldn't really tell you. I think I'm more like I'm very much paying attention to the colors. And one of the things I've noticed myself, like I've tried, you know, I'm trying to like pay attention to observe and figure it all out, is that like a certain color or two colors together will remind me of like a set of colors that I think would look really nice together. So then I kind of work in that color, you know, in that color scheme in one place. And then when I go to the next one, there's like a color that sort of bridges the two. So I really am just trying to like focus on, yeah, the colors. And I listen to music. I do listen to music. So I think that helps pass the time as well.
And this question's for Adrienne. Where/how can we view your installation once finished?
Yeah, that's a good question because I want to know too. No, I'm kidding. I got a call today. I think it'll be for a show in Memphis, but it's a homegrown thing. So I'm wanting to find some space in Texas again to just because it's really rooted in that kind of environment of people returning to their roots. So finding a space, but yeah, I'm also sorry I rushed through it, but the whole thing is supposed to be experienced in a different way, but you'll see more of those images and sounds hopefully sometime soon.
I'm going to turn it over to Allie.
Hi everyone, I'm Allie. I wanted to thank you guys all so much for being here today. I was going to see if anyone had any last questions for the artists while we're all still together, and if not, we can move on to the breakout rooms. I did have one other question for Adrienne real fast. I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the like conceptual framework of using the technique of layering in your work with the photographic images as well as the sound at the same time, and if that has to do maybe with what you're thinking about in terms of memory and archives.
Yeah, I think that's always been like kind of my style. I'm a maximalist to all degrees, and I think again, like just showing somebody in those steps of how they got to where they are in all forms. And I think so much of filmmaking itself does that on a maybe dialogue level. You're, you know, hand-holding the viewer on what's being said and exchanged, but so much of the in-between, right, especially with memory, leans on those other things in sound and picture. And so with picture, I came up under a lot of art house filmmakers, but beyond that, I think their editing style was very immersive. So the things that you would see wouldn't necessarily be layered, but you would cut from somebody crying and then, you know, seeing a hand held. And I think those ideas in my head of, okay, around layering, it's so much about the object, but it really is about that person. We're trying to get to that memory. So a lot of it you see on their face. So a lot of it was very, very macro, very gestural. Those things I think were reeked of emotion and kind of where if they could grasp something. And then sound, it's a beautiful thing we don't even have language for yet. I think the capabilities of just our storytelling and even cinema relying on that can really, you know, it can go to the moon, but the intonations are what I definitely look for in vocal editing. And then beyond that, there's an ambiance about how a general mood is. And that's something that was different per person, per object that they were holding on to, and then the memories that cycled around. So I've had to do more of like a music composition work and then layer that mood plus what our actual conversation was, plus the vocals, plus their intonations to create something that, again, it's non-linear, but there's such a narrative there that I feel like is matched in both those things. Thank you for that.
Yeah, no, I love your answer. I think there's a lot of really interesting things about time there, of you going back in the past on some of these things and people dealing with it now. And I think that that's super interesting direction to be going. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce the breakout rooms to all of y'all. For tonight's segment, we're splitting out into breakout rooms. Each artist will have a room, and you can go into that room and talk to that artist specifically about any sort of questions that you have for them. There will be a pop-up that'll appear that'll ask you if you want to participate in one of the rooms. And then there's also a little thing at the bottom of the screen, a tab where you can find all of the breakout rooms. I'm going to go ahead and open them up now. After 10 minutes, we'll meet back here and sort of wrap things up. So see you all soon.